You're listening to How to 20-something, the best podcast that helps both men and women navigate their 20s and learn how to adult across all aspects of their lives. We're going to focus on career, relationships, finances, fitness, nutrition, and all of the common challenges and obstacles a typical 20-something will face in this post-college life. I'm your host, Jess Diamond, and I am the CEO and founder of Jess Diamond Coaching, where I help young professionals get their shit together, gain their confidence, and own their life. No one prepares you for this adulting world, so allow me to help you feel like you are no longer a chicken running around with its head cut off, and that you actually know what the hell is going on and what your next step to take is. Welcome to How to 20-something. We're back with another episode of How to 20-something, where I'm going to continue on with the trend of calling some of y'all out, and this week it's about your coping mechanisms and what they say about you. I feel like when we hear the words coping mechanism, we typically think of bad ones like drugs and alcohol. But really there's quite the variety that I want to run through, from very bad ones to good ones, with the hopes that you start substituting your bad ones for the less bad ones, because that is a massive part of changing a habit that people often overlook. You need to replace your bad habit with something else, something that still gives your brain that pleasure sense and dopamine hit, but is better for you and supports the goals you're after. Otherwise, there's absolutely nothing enticing you to change your ways. Because why would anyone give up something that is currently providing them with a sense of relief for nothing, or for something that requires work? But this episode is an overview of different common coping mechanisms, what's destroying you whether you know it or not, and what you can do instead. Because I get it, being an adult is hard, and you're just trying to find different soothing tactics to put up with your life, in a sense. And that's not the way to live, but that's what you've been taught so far. So I want to call you out with what your coping mechanism says about you. So let's get into it. Similar to how I began last week's episode with defining quick fixes, I'm going to break down exactly what a coping mechanism is. Coping mechanisms are anything you do, whether it's on a subconscious or conscious level, to handle your stress, discomfort, unwanted emotions, or difficult situations. It's either for soothing purposes or for avoiding purposes, and it's actually designed as a tool for survival, so we need them. And that's why they exist on some kind of a spectrum, where some are actually healthy and others are disguised as healthy, but actually aren't. And I'm going to dive into all of them. Now, the first coping mechanism I want to run through, and in my opinion is the worst one because it's the most normalized, is alcohol. Yep, alcohol. If you need to crack open a drink after a long day to unwind or relax, alcohol is your coping mechanism. Even if you like to do that, like that is what your go-to method of relaxing after a long day is, then that's your coping mechanism. So it might not even be a need, but it's something you do. If you don't want to go out to a bar unless you're drinking, alcohol is your coping mechanism. If you receive bad news, feel stressed, overwhelmed, lonely, or anxious, and alcohol is your go-to to take the edge off, then alcohol is your coping mechanism. And before you get defensive, this isn't about whether you drink occasionally. It's about why you're drinking. And here's what it says about you. It says that you never learned how to self-soothe in a healthy way. You're probably someone who lives in a high-stress state, constantly on the go, under a lot of pressure, and overstimulated. So alcohol is your go-to crutch to calming your system down and outsourcing your relaxation techniques. Alcohol is filling the gap on your emotional regulation abilities. Now, what I'm not saying is you should never drink again, but what I am saying is it's time to stop and ask yourself why you're reaching for the drink and what can you do instead that also gives you the same sense of relief. Alcohol works because it's fast. So now you're dependent on it, which means now it's time to explore what else works fast for you. Like screaming in your car before you walk inside your house or apartment to let off some steam or get some release through your body. Next up is drugs. We're talking cocaine, weed, shrooms, cigarettes, and any other substance you can think of. These are all examples of external regulators, where you're not trying to sit with or figure out what's bothering you, but rather your only focus is changing this feeling right now. And now you're using these extra chemicals to help you deal with your life instead of letting your brain produce what is rightfully needed in that moment. So this isn't even about finding the willpower to stop. It's about finding other ways to receive support. And what I find the most funny about drugs is that we were drilled as kids to say no to drugs, as though people would be offering them to us for free on a regular basis. Now, drugs are expensive, and yet it is a lot of 20-somethings' go-to coping mechanism, and then you complain about not having enough money. People use drugs in a similar way to alcohol because they are quick and easy to avoid the problems and emotions at hand. However, if you use drugs to cope, then you are someone trying to escape your reality, not just to relax or numb out, but fully leave to another planet. Drugs become the fastest way to change how you feel without having to understand why you feel that way. So instead of having this mechanism be a different way to emotionally regulate, you're prohibiting that development from happening at all. Next on that list of bad coping mechanisms that every single one of us is guilty of is doom scrolling. And I would say binge watching TV falls under the same category, where you delay your responsibilities for quick hits of dopamine in the form of entertainment. You'll get off the couch in 5 minutes, stay in bed for just 2 videos more, and you and I both know you're lying to yourself when you do that, because it's rarely ever just those 5 minutes or 2 videos. Instead, you're decreasing your attention span and filling your time with brain rot. And don't worry, I'm right there with you. I put an hour timer on scrolling on TikTok to keep me accountable to my endless scrolling. And that hour isn't an hour straight either. It's over the course of the day. And here's what it says about you. If this is your go-to coping mechanism to fill time or distract yourself, it says you're mentally exhausted, tired of making decisions, and craving some kind of distraction that doesn't ask much of you. It also is used as a tool to avoid. You'd rather scroll than face a task, a conversation, or a feeling. And lastly, you're bored, and you're using it to fill time since it's a passive activity. Now, this draw to doom scroll is really because your brain is overstimulated and under-rested. Unfortunately, it's not the turn your brain off tactic you think it is. It's actually keeping you in a low-level state of anxiety while convincing you you're relaxing. Try picking up a book or going for a walk instead. If food is your coping mechanism, as in you reach for food when you're sad, mad, happy, anxious, bored, and any other emotion, then you are seeking comfort, safety, or control. Food is comfort. It's why there's literally the term comfort food. And it's a different type of sensory stimulus that does help calm your brain and body down. It's because you don't know how to self-regulate your own emotions to soothe yourself from the stress, the loneliness, the sadness, or boredom you're experiencing. If your parent ever gave you food to shut you up as a kid, there's a really good chance this is your coping mechanism. And similar to drugs, it actually has nothing to do with willpower. Willpower is the type of food you gravitate towards, but using it to cope is more emotional than anything. And if you've heard of emotional eaters, or you know you are one, then welcome. This is your coping mechanism. However, when food is your emotional regulator, you're damaging your own hunger cues and probably hating your body in the process, since you're eating when you're not actually hungry. When I had an office job, I was a known bored eater. I still bored eat. So I made sure I had access to a lot of healthy snack options. Food is so accessible, it's almost impossible to avoid it when you are feeling some type of discomfort. And there are so many palate-pleasing effects that come with eating different foods that it really does serve as an automatic way to calm your system down. So if you find yourself in this category, drink some water, go for a walk, surround yourself with healthy options. Because if you're still thinking about food after water and a walk for that sense of comfort, then eating a healthy food is still going to scratch that itch. Otherwise, you'll be finding yourself back to the vending machine and regretting your choices later on. Moving right along to a less negative coping mechanism, but still not a great one, is sleeping. When you choose to sleep, instead of facing your life or your problems, it often means you're burnt out or overwhelmed. Now, I wish I could go to sleep when I was overwhelmed, but unfortunately, for me, it has the opposite effect. Similar to drugs, you are using sleep to escape. You think you're resting, but you're literally putting yourself into an unconscious state to avoid your life, which could be decisions, events, people, or emotions. You convince yourself you're depleted and need the rest and recovery, but you're really using it as a way to cope with what's going on. Now, this is different from being actually exhausted and needing rest, like if you had a string of crazy days in a row. And the way you can tell the difference is the reason behind your sleep. The good thing is going to sleep is definitely better than the other habits like spending money or doing drugs. But it's still being used as a method to avoid. And when you wake up, you're still going to have to face those problems. Speaking of spending money, shopping is also a coping mechanism. You've probably heard of retail therapy. Shopping as a coping mechanism means you're chasing a quick hit of relief or even your own identity. It's for if you're having a moment of low self-worth, stress, or overwhelm. And it's not usually about the item you're buying. It's about the relief you're seeking, the glimpse of happiness and excitement to hide the negative emotions you're otherwise experiencing. I'm not saying you don't have to go through your favorite brands anymore and just stop shopping altogether, but what I am saying is maybe pause for a day or two before hitting checkout. Let the feeling simmer down, and you might surprise yourself by not actually wanting or needing those items anymore. The last 4 coping mechanisms I'm going to run through are on the healthier side. So I've gone from most unhealthy, and now we're shifting more into healthier ways to cope. The first one is moderately healthy, and it's exercise. I know running is my coping mechanism when I'm fuming mad, as it helps release the buildup of emotions I'm feeling right then and there, to the point where I feel like I can't face my problems until I've calmed myself down, and this is a healthy way to cope with big emotions. However, you can abuse exercise if you're coping as a way of self-torture, or when you're in a fight with your body. So yes, it is definitely a healthy outlet for stress and regulating your emotions, but it can also be unhealthy when you're using it to gain a sense of control or doing it too much. Like if you panic or feel stress when you miss a workout, or if you're feeling fat and you need to punish yourself, you go and work out. If you're bored, you're going to go work out. Both of those fall under the same category of using exercise as a way to cope with something in that moment. So instead of being something supportive, it now becomes a method of avoidance. I think a good way to determine if this is your coping mechanism, since it is one of the sneakier ones, is sitting with yourself when you take a few days off of working out. Can you skip a workout and not feel like you're losing your mind or guilty? I know I used to go crazy if I didn't work out that day, and it would largely stem from the fear of getting fat. I took exercise to the extreme and justified it as being healthy when it crossed the line to support my insecurities and not my health. Which I guess you could argue that supporting my insecurities does help my mental health, but it does so without getting to the root of how I was taking care of myself and justifying it with I'm taking care of myself by exercising. And coping mechanisms fall into the category of quick fixes, so getting to the root is obviously not top of mind right then and there. You're wanting immediate relief by coping. All right, these last 3 that I'm going to discuss are the healthiest coping mechanisms out there. They are cleaning, journaling, and talking things out. If you're someone who cleans to cope, then you are trying to create external order to calm internal chaos. This is when your thoughts feel messy or out of control, or if you're trying to avoid another task, so clean to feel productive, when really you're procrastinating what actually needs to get done. However, you are still cleaning a messy environment, and they say your environment is a reflection on your brain and how you feel. So an orderly place will start to let your brain take order and tackle other important tasks one at a time, which is why this isn't such a bad coping mechanism to have. If your go-to way to cope with your thoughts and feelings is to journal, then you are someone who wants to look inward and understand your problems instead of trying to outrun them. You have a high level of emotional maturity and awareness, so long as you don't ruminate on what you write and overanalyze your thoughts rather than feel into them. Journaling slows thinking down and creates clarity so you can work through what's bothering you. I know I turn to journaling when I have persistent thoughts I can't shake, and once I write it out, the thoughts stop repeating. So if you're overwhelmed and diving into your spiral, then grab a pen and paper and get to writing. Write out what you're obsessing about, and you'll find that your thoughts start to become much easier to manage. And lastly, if talking things out is your coping mechanism, then you are someone who knows you don't have to carry the weight of the world alone. You are someone who values connection, different perspectives, and external processes for your emotions. This is one of the strongest coping mechanisms, but it only works well if you are talking to someone who makes you feel safe and supported and heard. Humans are social creatures, so leaning into that connection muscle with a close friend or family member helps you release the happy chemicals in your brain and helps you work through your problems knowing you're not facing them all alone. Which, hint, hint, this is basically what my TEDx talk emphasizes. And we are officially 1 month out from giving my talk. If you're local to Charlotte or want to make the trip to the city, grab your ticket before they sell out. I'm recording this a month ahead of time before this episode comes out, and VIP tickets are already all sold out. So if there's still a ticket left, you should go claim it. And it's going to be so good. There are 14 other super interesting talks that will guarantee you walk away feeling inspired and ready to take action in your life. It's going to change your perspective on a lot of things. So that maybe your bad coping mechanisms switch to some good ones. Oh, and you can grab that ticket by heading to TEDxSugarCreekWomen.com. Google it. You could check out the show notes if I remember to put the link in there, which I should remember, but I would love to see you there. It's going to be such an amazing event, and you should really come. But back on topic, I'm sure there are a lot of other coping mechanisms I didn't mention. So if that's the case and you didn't feel called out, then send me an email and tell me what your go-to coping mechanism is, and I will personally tell you what that means about you. I had fun creating this episode. I started asking people what theirs are, and they started asking other people because I know we know what to do when we need to self-soothe. We just don't really talk about it. So this kind of opened up that conversation, since most of the time it airs on the negative side of the spectrum, which is okay, as long as you also work to include the positive ways to cope too. But life's hard, and you need to learn how to deal with your own thoughts and feelings. That doesn't include irresponsible outlets or shoving them down. And on that note, this does conclude another episode of How to 20-something. I hope you felt called out, and if you liked what you heard, you learned something new, or know someone who needs to be called out, then please share this episode, post it to your story, send it to a friend, just do something that helps me reach all of the 20-somethings out in this world trying to navigate the most confusing decade of their lives. And as always, I can't wait to be in your headphones again next week with another brand new episode.